Richard Smith, thank you very much for joining us.
It's fine, Jake. No problems at all.
Cheers. Oompher is all about inspiring people to achieve extraordinary things. So when you were growing up, who and what has inspired you in your career?
Look, I was really fortunate in growing up. I grew up in Ashburton, small country town, and sport was a big part of growing up. And I was really fortunate to have some wonderful people who gave their time and just really engaged with young people and got you enthusiastic and keen about playing sport and just giving things a go. People who spring to mind, Ozzy Hooper, who was my first cricket coach, and he did some fantastic things and made you feel valued and made you have fun and excitement, and those sorts of people are the ones that you remember and then say, well, can I influence someone else's life later on the same way that they influenced me?
Yeah, and do you get huge satisfaction now giving back to, I guess, up-and-coming players and the way that people helped you out when you were a youngster?
Yeah, in a couple of ways. One is that I work with the coaches to make sure we get the players we want for the Crusaders.
Yeah.
So that's always satisfying when we identify a player and we're able to then get them to join the Crusaders. The other part of my role is working with the coaches and our medical staff and our strength and conditioning staff and helping them be the best they can be. So it's about helping them go on and further their studies or do professional development, and for me to see our coaches grow and implement stuff that they've learned in their coaching is really satisfying. So you talk about stuff, you work on stuff, and you actually see it happening on the training field. That is hugely satisfying.
Yeah, and Richard, you've had quite a lengthy career in rugby with different teams and different roles, so can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Previously I was a rugby coach. I'm now retired, and I've probably coached in the game close to 30 years, I suppose, from secondary school level right through to Crusader development sides. And I've been really fortunate to have travelled the world with rugby. I had 2 years where I coached New Zealand under-19s in Dubai and then in Northern Ireland, and in fact that year in Ireland we won the World Championship, and it was the last under-19 World Cup they ever held, because then they shifted to under-20s. So,
okay, awesome.
So sport has been a fantastic vehicle for me for just doing some great things and travelling to some great places.
Yeah, it's quite a few roles there, so I guess it's not even like work to you, is it just like...
No, well, I was still working in my other job at that time, and I was again, really fortunate that I had a job that also allowed me to do something that I was passionate about at the same time.
Yeah.
And both of them were really complementary. The job I did was about helping coaches get better, and here I was a coach myself, and I was able to put into practice a whole lot of stuff that I was working on. So it was a fantastic time in my life.
Yeah, and can you tell us a bit about Canterbury Rugby now? I mean, it's produced so many distinguished players over the years and won so many titles. So what about the region and its program do you think that makes it so extraordinary?
Yeah, well, there's two bits to it. We have Canterbury Rugby. We have the Crusaders, which is the super team, and we also have Tasman, who are involved, obviously, because they're another major partner in the Crusaders.
Yeah.
And look, one of the things I think there's talent. There's talent here. There's talent in Tasman. There's talent all around the country, but talent's only half, or maybe 10% of it. It's You've got to have young men who have a pathway, who are prepared to work hard, and are able to access expertise. And one of the things that we're really fortunate is that we have got former players who are prepared to give back. They're our resource coaches. They come in. We have an academy system that's second to none, where a young player can come in. If they've got some capability, they'll get put into a 3-year program where they'll get exposed to all sorts of high performance components that'll help them become a better player. And over the years, that sort of structured pathway has just produced player after player, and we can't keep them all, so there's a huge number of players who've come through our academy system. I think at the moment in ITM Cup there might be something like 57 players who've been through the Canterbury system playing around the country.
Yeah.
So that's a huge amount, and we're actually adding to New Zealand Rugby in doing that, not just our own rugby.
Yeah.
So.
And are these programs quite specific to Canterbury as opposed to other regions?
No, every other region has an academy program,
especially
especially the major unions. But of course it comes down to resourcing, and it comes down to the capability that they might have within their own region. And again, we're lucky, our Crusader coaches go out and do work with our young academy players, so they're fantastic that they get that access.
So I guess a lot of our audience knows quite a lot about coaching and managing and so on, but what can you tell us about your role as high performance manager? What makes that different?
Okay, so there's a couple of components to my role. One is ensuring that the rugby performance program, that's the coaches, the manager, the medical team, the strength and conditioning team, our logistics, our player welfare manager, our IT and analysts, specialists, and all basically they have everything they need, and that they have the capability to deliver the performances that allow our players to play out in the field.
Okay.
So that's a major part of the role, is to make sure that is as close to world class as we can be. So we're always striving. I don't think you ever get to become world class. I don't think it's something that you can actually define, but we're always working to be the best we can. So a big part of my role is just ensuring that happens, and that I'm doing that myself, that I'm identifying what is best practice in a high performance leader's role, and I'm lucky I have networks around the world that I can use as benchmarks to say, how well am I going. The other key part of my role is that I work with the coaches to do the player contracting, so that make sure that we get the players we want, that we keep the players we want, and that we provide them with what they need so that they can perform as well as they can. Because ultimately what we're after is performance.
Yeah. So is your success in your role measured by how well the Crusaders do in Super Rugby, or?
Well, I mean, obviously winning is one of the measures, absolutely. But, in sport, you win and you lose. That's the nature of sport. People wouldn't watch it if they knew that only one side was ever going to win, because it would become boring. And that's the contract you kind of enter into when you take a role like this. Yes, you want to get the result, but it's a key is around process and performance. So we've got to make sure that we've got the systems and structures in place that allow us to deliver a process that's consistently producing world-class players. And if we do that, we know they'll perform on the field. And if they do that, 9 times out of 10, you get the result. But if you just aim on the result, you'll forget about all the other stuff. So there are other measures in place, like our end-of-year surveys that we do, how well we've done in particular areas, fitness of our players, their skin fold measurements, our stats from our games. So we've got a huge number of measurements we take to indicate how we're performing.
Yeah, and at that management level, do you feel, I guess, the managers in general feel quite a bit of pressure to make sure that the team is performing, though, otherwise can...
They do. Our whole staff, we constantly feel that pressure that comes from the outside, but we have to learn to manage it. And we have to have coping strategies around it.
So have that process in place from the start.
Absolutely, otherwise you'd be a basket case. And you can't allow the judgments of other people to creep into your thoughts. You've just got to trust your process, and you've got to work hard at it and keep to the straight line. Yeah,
and what's the most difficult part about it to manage? What part do you really struggle with, or do you find a real challenge?
Oh, look, the contracting is always a challenge, because you'll have a player who has an agent. The agent will be looking after the player's best interests. We do have a budget set by the New Zealand Rugby Union each year that we have to keep within. And, for us, we've got a lot of All Blacks, and managing all our All Blacks, both in the program and then when they're away with the All Blacks, and when they come back into our program, and then when they're allowed to start again at the start of the year, managing our All Blacks is actually a real challenge. It's a positive challenge. Of course, we love producing All Blacks. 1 in 3 Crusaders become an All Black. So if you want to become an All Black, basically your probability is higher playing for the Crusaders. There have only ever been, I think at the moment, 189 Crusaders in the history of the organisation, so we don't have a huge player turnover. So these are quite compelling stats for a young man. But as I say, one of our jobs, we believe, is that we need to produce All Blacks, because we know then we're doing things to a really high standard.
Yeah. And what would your advice be for the people out there who want to become a coach or a high performance leader? What's the best way to go about it?
Look, I think what you need to do is the variety of experience. I mean, I went to university. I got university degrees. I've got postgraduate qualifications. I was a teacher, but that had nothing to do with where I've ended up. I think it's curiosity. It's seeing life as a lifelong learning experience. Networking, connecting with people. I think the people skills are huge. I think unless you make connections with people, you can have all the technical knowledge. You can have a high intellect, but unless you've got the ability to connect with people. And so those would be the skills that I would encourage coaches to continually work on. Most coaches often think they need to know more about rugby. Yes, that will always happen because they love rugby. They'll keep finding out more about rugby. But the difference will be how well they can handle, lead, manage, and just inspire other people. And motivation must come from within. A player must be internally motivated, but that doesn't mean to say that a coach can't inspire.
Okay, and what about a degree? Do you think that's quite a necessary part, or not so much?
No, because there are many paths, and our Crusader coaches are a real mix. Some have academic backgrounds, others don't. And I think all a degree does is provide you with an opportunity and a formal learning experience. There are other ways to learn, and I wouldn't say to any young coach who may already be working and they aspire to be a professional coach that they need to go off. I think they need to study, do some form of study, whether that's informal study or formal study. They need to keep learning. But that learning doesn't necessarily need to be academic learning, but it certainly needs to be learning. They need to be open to learning and have an open mind.
Okay. Yeah. And now, just in terms of players, what are some of the key factors you see as that you see in up-and-coming players and players that are, I guess, world-class today? What are some of the key factors that they all have?
They're very clear on what their role is.
Yeah.
So they're very clear on what their positional role is and what their role within the team is and how they contribute and what are the key fundamental things they need to deliver week in, week out. Players who aren't sure on that will have inconsistent performance. Okay. But the players who are really clear. So clarity on role is one thing we work hard on. Top players have an incredibly well-rehearsed process. Their preparation is top-notch, that they know what things they have to do during the week to get themselves ready to perform. And that's also a distinguishing factor between top players and maybe players who fluctuate week to week, is that their process around their preparation is just absolutely spot on. I think the other thing is that our top players, they're mentally tough, they're very resilient, and that's not talking about physically being able to take the hits. They can do that, and lots of rugby players can do that, but they can also handle adversity. So it's when you do lose a game in the last minute, they can next week get up and start again. They don't let that impact on their performance. So this mental toughness is really important. It's something we talk about.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that here at the Crusaders we have a really strong learning environment culture. Okay. And one of the things is the top players have a very open mind. They will continue to learn. Okay. They will never say, I don't need to do that, or I don't know. Whereas there'll be other players who think they've arrived and they'll close their mind and they won't continue to grow and develop their skills. So a growth mindset, an open mind to learning is something that distinguishes a lot of our top players.
Yeah. So guys like Dan and Richie and so on, they're always prepared to learn new things.
Absolutely, yeah, because the more you learn, the more you realise that you didn't know before.
Yeah, awesome. And natural ability, does that come into it?
Oh, absolutely. Look, all our players are talented.
Yeah.
But talent minus hard work and work ethic will be unfulfilled. Okay. So the thing for us is that the other thing, I guess you've raised, the defining point is that the work ethic of our top players is incredibly high. There's reasons why they are world-class players, and that is to do with their work ethic.
Yeah.
And they're smart about how they work too. Okay. They build a base, but then they're very, because their systems and processes are good, they're very efficient and effective at maintaining that work ethic. Yeah. Because they can't work hard all the time, because they'll break down. Yeah. So they've got enough nous about them to know how to manage themselves.
Yeah, nice. So can you talk us through sort of an average day, I guess, in the life of someone like Richie McCaw? I mean, from recovery to training to food, like
so typically if it's a Monday morning, our players, and we've played on the Saturday. Yeah. Our players will have already had all their footage on their personal devices. Okay. So they'll be able to have had a look at some of their footage. Monday morning they'll come in and they'll have their personal review documents already prepared, and they'll sit down. Every player does a one-on-one with one of the coaches, and they'll sit down and go through their game. That takes 10 to 15 minutes per player. They'll probably have, depending on how much game time they had, they may well have a bit of a strength session in the gym, or they may have to go to medical and get some physio. Players may have to do a wee bit of extra running if they haven't had a game. And then there'll be a recovery session, and depending on what their injury status is, they may have done, some of them may go to the pool and do that, some of them may do it on the grass, some will do it on a spin bike. And then following that there'll be a team review process. and a unit review process. So we've done individual, units and teams. And at the end of a Monday, there's typically a massage as well. And that goes from 8 a.m. in the morning till usually 6 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And so it's a full work day.
busy
Tuesday
day,
will then be out on the grass, starting to prepare for the next game. So there'll be put in place the game plans, and we'll have 2 sessions, and they'll have strength and conditioning in the gym, and they'll start to put together the skills that they need and the game plan that they need for the next game on the Saturday. Wednesday is a recharge day where the players get to recover, but again they'll have physio and they'll have a mixture of things, and there'll be some promotional activities that they might have to do because their sponsorship requirements are quite big. Thursday is almost preparation day. It's like rehearsal day, where again 2 sessions where they'll now put the game plan together and rehearse it ready for the game on Saturday. Friday is what we call a clarity run, where they'll actually go to the stadium if it's a home game, and they'll actually go through for half an hour just working through their different phases around the field, and that's a confidence booster. That's all just about getting some confidence. Team will then have lunch after that together. They might have some promotional activity Friday afternoon, and then they're free until typically about 4 o'clock on the Saturday, where there's a meal if they want. Strapping starts about 5, and by just after 6:30 they're starting to wander out on the field to warm up and do their warm up. Just before that, the coach or the captain will have had their finals talk with the team, which is very short because all the hard work's been done during the week. And from that point on, it's just into game mode until 7:35 when they run out in the field and play.
Fantastic.
And then we start all over again.
Okay, great. So for the school players out there, what's from your experience, what's your advice to them who want to become professional players one day?
I think they need to have balance in their life. I think their studies or getting a vocation, or if they go to university or polytech, is really important. They need to have more than just one bow, one string to their bow. They can start living the life of a professional without being professional. That means they can have good habits around their nutrition, their habits around training, making sure they're getting enough sleep, make sure they have a planned, organised life where they have time for their rugby, their work, their study, their family, their friends. Those things all are important. I would be concerned if we just had a young man who came in and said all he wanted to do was be a professional player and his life was 24/7 rugby. I would suspect that would be an imbalance, and we in fact don't allow people in our academy system unless they're doing other things. So it's
important to be balanced.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So obviously guys like Rich, you have his agricultural degree, Comrade Smith law degree, so you do take that really seriously.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Sam Whitelock's finished his Lincoln University degree, Luke Whitelock's finished his degree at Canterbury. We place high value on those players still going through and finishing things like that. But on the other hand, we've got players who have started building apprenticeships, and Wyatt Crockett's a builder. So again, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as they have some alternate options available to them.
Okay, and the players obviously have a huge amount of pressure, from performance pressures to media scrutiny and so on. How do you deal with that here at the Crusaders? What's your advice to them on that?
Yeah, well, we have a couple of things there. We're fortunate that we have a media manager, Juliet, and she works with the players on how they present themselves to the media, what they say, and how they conduct themselves. We also put the players through media and public speaking training. So that's a really important thing. So they've got the skills to then be able to handle themselves. We have a mental skills conditioner who helps our players work on just managing themselves mentally, both around performance and how they manage themselves with people. And we have a professional development manager, Mark Granby, who also works with the players in their holistic development. And so what, again, we're trying to do is have the professional player, but have everything else in place for them that allows them to perform on the field, because that's the ultimate thing we need them to do. But we know that we need to get all those other things in place, managing the pressure, managing the media, making sure all of the other parts of their life are in place.
Because it obviously helps on the field, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. A distracted player will be distracted on the field.
Okay. And Richard, you yourself have co-written the book Sports Coaching and Learning, as well as delivered quite a few seminars in terms of the relationships between business and sport. From your research and presentations and so on, what would you sum up as in a sporting context, your sort of top bits of advice, I guess, for business people out there, how does it relate to sport?
Yeah, look, I think we learn from both. There's a whole lot of corporate concepts that we use in the Crusaders.
Yeah.
We have a really strong, we have a vision. We know what it is we want to do. We have really strong values that underpin what we do, just like a business will do.
Yeah.
We're really clear on how we can, the behaviours that we'd see if those values are being lived, and we can actually measure some of those behaviours. Now, that's all just straight out of standard strategic planning that comes from the corporate world. Yeah. But we actually live it and make sure it happens. And I guess when I go into organisations, I sometimes challenge them around, do they have stuff up on the wall, but are they actually living it? And we refer constantly to how, or challenge ourselves as to whether we are living our values. And that's a really strong driver for us, is the value of respect, for instance. What does that look like? What will we see if we see respect? And can we challenge people when we think there isn't respect present? Those things are important to us. And the sports coaching and learning, that was around just understanding that people don't all learn the same. So when you're introducing material, understand that the people in front of you will have different learning needs, and what the job of the coach or the job of the CEO or whoever it is to ensure that they're meeting the learning needs of everyone who's in the organisation. But again, fundamentally we come back to a real people focus.
Yeah.
We know we have the technical knowledge, we know we have the experts in the areas we want, we know we have the passion, but if we can't relate well to people, and our coaches can't, then we're not going to get across the line with any of that stuff. So we really push a people first concept.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I've just got a few quick fire questions to finish
sure.
now. In summary, what would be your top 3 tips for people out there wanting to become professional rugby players?
Understand that their talent will only get them so far, so that their work ethic and understanding what it is their core roles are, what they need, what they're already good at, and what they need to get better at.
Yeah.
And then working towards closing that gap.
Okay.
But also balancing that with keep working at the things they're really good at. A lot of people stop working at the things they're really good at, and that's the difference. That could be the defining difference. It's just not about making something that's not quite so good better. It's actually making what you're really good at a lot better.
Yeah, right. Okay.
For me, that's a really important, and again, I just reiterate, it goes back to being open-minded, having a growth mindset, being able to look in the mirror and be really honest and say, and understand what you're responsible for, what you can control and what you can't control. But if you sort of asked for 3 points, and I'll go to a good friend of mine, Gilbert Anoka, who works with the All Blacks. Yeah. And I remember talking with Gilbert one day, and he talked about the 3-legged stool, and he said, these young people, you need to have a 3-legged stool. One is your sporting endeavours, the other is your study or your work or your vocation or polytech or whatever it is, and the other stool is your family and friends.
Right.
And as a young person, you need to have all 3 the same length, because the moment one of them gets a different length, the stool will fall over.
Right.
So
having
for any
that balance is just vital.
For any young people coming through year 12s and 13s at school, they need to ensure that they have that in right perspective, because the unfortunate thing is a career can end with a crippling injury, and all of a sudden that leg's gone and their stool falls over. So if they have those things all worked out, then they're not just relying on one thing. It's sure, have the vision, have the dream of being a professional player, but be prepared for other options as well.
Yeah. And is there a bit of learning, I guess, that you've learnt along the way that you keep at the forefront of how you train and so on today when coaching players and so on, that at the start of your career you maybe didn't know, and you think that there's something really important you've learned along the way?
Yeah, look, a key thing is that I think when anyone starts on something new, they're always focused on themselves because it's new to them. So they're so focused on themselves and making sure they deliver, they actually forget about the person in front of them.
Right.
And in fact, in coaching, when you're a leader, the most important person is not you, it's actually the person in front of you. And I think over the years, I've still got some work to do, but we talk about being present. And I think one of the key things is that whoever you are dealing with, you need to be fully present for them, because it's about them, not about you.
And what are you most proud of when you look over your career today?
Well, my biggest thrill is always when I see people who have grown, developed, learnt, are applying stuff, have achieved,
Yeah.
and knowing that you, in a small way, have had a part to play in that, allowing them to get to where they've got to.
Yeah.
It's a very behind the scenes role,
Okay.
and I'm very happy with that. I don't, you don't do these sorts of jobs for publicity. You're deliberately behind the scenes, and the satisfaction comes from sitting back knowing that you helped a person grow and maybe aid the performance that you see on the field.
And what would the 16-year-old boy you were think of who you've become today? Would he be pretty proud?
I think so. Probably would scratch the head and say, "How the hell did you get there?"
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to actually, define your pathway. And I don't think there is linear pathways these days.
Yeah.
I think you develop a set of skills, you develop a set of knowledge, you get a number of experiences, you interact with a whole lot of people, and out of that, opportunities arise, and sometimes you're able to take advantage of those opportunities. Sometimes the opportunity closes on you and you go in a different direction, and that's part of that, having things in balance but also being adaptable.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, you've had a pretty extraordinary career in sport. So, Richard Smith, to finish, can you look down this camera here and tell us, what are your wise words for the people of New Zealand?
Talent will only get you so far. Work ethic and the way you work and interact with other people is actually going to be a hugely determining factor in whether you're successful. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's your academic study, your vocational work, or sport. People, talent and work ethic combined help produce performance.
Great. Richard Smith, thanks so much.
Jake, my pleasure.
Cheers.